minutes to showtime, Mr. Yang.
Okay, thanks.
Also, have you seen Miss Louie yet?
Is Annie Louie?
Hey, Sam!
Hey Annie, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just at the airport right now, waiting for my flight to Hong Kong. Haven't been there in so many years, so I can't wait. It's going to be great. What's up with you?
What's up with me? We have a show tonight. It's a new season.
It's not happening tonight. Are you kidding me? Oh my god, Sam, why didn't you tell me earlier? No, I'm not going to be able to make it. I have a flight to catch. Okay, when you said tonight, I thought you were just saying the name of the show. I didn't know you meant it was happening tonight. But it's fine. I'm going to make a phone call. Everything's going to be okay.
Hey, Annie.
Hey, Wenlei. I'm not going to be there for China tonight. I was wondering if you could maybe fill in for me.
It's about damn time.
你好，欢迎收看今晚中国秀，我是 Samuel Yang.
And I'm Wenlei Ma.
This week on the show, the Chinese version of Top Gun putting propaganda on the front line.
And reflecting on the Tiananmen Square Massacre, Wu'er Kaixi is China's most wanted student ringleader.
Do I regret? No. Would I do it again? I don't know.
To the news now, and China's defense minister has defended sailing a warship across the path of an American destroyer. General Li Shangfu told a gathering of some of the world's top defense officials in Singapore the so-called freedom of navigation patrols were a provocation to China. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says Washington would not flinch in the face of bullying or coercion. He raises real concerns of a possible accident occurring that could lead to an escalation between the two nuclear powers. For more, we're joined by Emily Feng, NPR's China correspondent. Emily, welcome back to China Tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
What does this encounter say about the state of China-US relations?
Well, it shows that there's this disconnect. On the diplomacy side, on trade, there is a bit of warming up. There's more interaction now between high-level officials. This week, the Financial Times and Bloomberg reported that Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, might travel to Beijing in the coming weeks. But on the military side, things are plateauing, if not getting worse. And the number of near misses they've had in waters around China has been quite concerning. And the potential for some kind of accident to spiral out of these near misses is quite risky, especially given there's still no direct communication channels at the very, very top levels of the US and Chinese military.
Do you think China is becoming more aggressive in the South China Sea?
They've been aggressive for the last, more than a decade. I think what's happened is you've seen the US and its allies, particularly the UK, step up its routine patrols of this area. So it's been Western countries and allies that have been more aggressive in pushing back, finally, well, some people may argue, against Chinese claims in the South China Sea. But this has been an ongoing issue, and it's one that's now become, once again, a hot button issue.
Now to an update on China's economy, with the latest figures revealing China's exports have fallen sharply, down 7.5% year-on-year in May, the biggest decline since January. Imports also contracted 4.5% as China's economy was hit by weak demand both at home and globally.
中国的政策不透明，经济复苏无力，再加上了美中交恶一连串的不利因素下的跨国企业最近大举上演了出中国际，就连深耕数十年的台商也开始拔腿狂跑。
The latest figures come after China removed more trade barriers for some Australian fruits in a further thawing of trade relations between the two countries. What do these latest export-import figures say about the state of China's economy?
It shows how closely interrelated all these economies are. And so China's recovery from its nearly 3 years of zero COVID is dependent on how the rest of the world is doing. And the rest of the world is also seeing contracting economic activity, which means it's buying less of China's stuff. And that's why we saw this higher than expected drop in China's exports. So far, China's domestic recovery from zero COVID has been slower than people expected, mostly because their own citizens just don't have as much money as they thought they did. They're not buying as much. And both industrial growth and commercial activity from regular, everyday, mom and pop consumers has been quite low. That's concerning for all of us. We want China's economy to do well because it helps other economies do well. China buys raw materials from other countries. A lot of companies have supply chains in China, but it's quite concerning that you've just kind of seen a slow recovery, much slower than people expected.
So do you think this is putting pressure on China to loosen up regulations on tech and property sectors?
To a certain extent. So you've already seen a loosening of regulation on real estate. There had been really, really strict regulations limiting how much real estate developers could borrow more than just about 2 years ago. And this nearly decimated the real estate sector, which generates a huge amount of revenue for local governments in China. Those lending restrictions have now eased because of just how badly the economy is doing. But you also see China prioritizing national security and national goals more than economic growth in some cases. And so the restrictions on technology groups, on private lending and private tech companies have continued despite the fact that maybe loosening them a little bit would generate a little bit of extra growth, because the priority now is making sure that private companies align with national policy.
Emily, thanks so much for joining China Tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
And finally, 2 high-profile Chinese snooker players have been banned for life. Liang Wenbo and Liang were punished for their role in match-fixing involving 8 more of their countrymen. The game is reeling from the cheating scandal, and China is at the heart of it. There are growing concerns about the influence of organized crime in the game.
To what's making news in China, and more importantly, what's not trending on Chinese social media this week. There were numerous posts by Western embassies on the Tiananmen Square anniversary deleted on Weibo. The British embassy tweeted, "Today, we remember those who were lost during China's government crackdowns on 4th of June 1989. Despite China's ban on public discussion of the horror of that day, we posted the below image on Chinese social media today, showing how party media had once reported on the events." Within 20 minutes, censors removed our post on Weibo, censoring the news as reported by the party's most authoritative news outlet on the day of the massacre. The European Union's tweet, "We won't forget, we will never forget those who remember history." The Canadian and Polish embassies also had their posts deleted. 34 years ago, thousands of pro-democracy activists gathered in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, calling for greater freedom of speech and less censorship. Their protests were crushed after China's government sent in the military, leaving an unknown number of students dead or injured. The events of the 4th of June 1989 remain a highly sensitive topic in China, with authorities banning any public commemorations, but some of those who did escape have been reflecting on their harrowing experience. Wu'er Kaixi is #1 on China's list of most wanted student leaders. He's now living in exile in Taiwan.
Wu'er Kaixi, welcome to China Tonight.
Glad to be here.
34 years on, it's still a mark on your life, but many young Chinese don't even know Tiananmen happened. What do you remember?
Well, first of all, the Chinese young people don't remember not because of it's faded in their memory. It was erased from their memory. There's a strong effort by the Chinese government to make sure that people don't remember that. So I certainly remember it vividly. I was a very young college student back then in Beijing Normal University, and it was one of the most incredible 50 days in my life, for sure. Well, after that, I was put on Chinese most wanted list. And the rumors goes by in Beijing that they didn't want to capture me alive. It's arrest warrant, but pretty much it could be a death warrant as well. So I had to flee. Then I did manage to escape from China with the help of Hong Kong friends, like supporters of the democracy movement, not CIA. I did manage to escape to Hong Kong. Since my exile, I lived in France, I lived in the United States, and then I live in Taiwan now.
So how have the events in 1989 impacted your life?
My parents were prohibited from traveling abroad. I haven't seen them in 35 years. So I often said that living in exile is also like living in a mental or spiritual prison that's locked up. You build the prison almost yourself. I cannot take part in what's happening in China. I cannot continue the business we started. We lost the battlefield. But it also gave me opportunity to live in democracy, to truly understand what we were fighting for. We call ourselves democracy activists, we call ourselves our movement democracy movement. But we didn't really know much about democracy other than what we learned from the book. What inspired us to took the street in 1989 is not so much of how much our rich knowledge of democracy. It's more of a pain because of the lack of democracy.
Now, younger generations in China are less enthusiastic compared to your generation. What do you think about that reality?
We were perhaps one of the last generation that was brought up in a collectivism-centric civilization. We were brought up with the idea of patriotism, like intellectual hold the responsibility for the country. But the younger generation, they were brought up in information boost, like information blast time. They're much more individualism-centric. But mark my word, they care about their personal freedom, probably much more than our generation. They want to have room to grow into their full individual themselves. So once they realize they have not been given a full capacity in the society because of this totalitarian regime, they will probably be more political than our generation.
So you've been in exile for more than 30 years, and now you are living in Taiwan and a Taiwanese citizen. Is Taiwan what you and your peers wanted for China as a democracy when protesting in Tiananmen Square in 1989?
We didn't know enough about Taiwan in 1989. We didn't know enough in the early days of my exiles about Taiwan. But I lived in Taiwan in the past 26 years. And then I have lived through this amazing time for Taiwan to transform into an exemplary democracy. It can certainly play an important role for the Chinese democracy movement, and it is playing that role, inspiring people to look up to this democracy. But I also would like to mention that Taiwan is in the front line of Chinese threat, and then that threat is not just manipulation of your politics or harm you in the trade war. That threat is military. That threat has a number attached to it, over 1,000 missiles pointing at that island.
So what you and your peers were doing in Tiananmen Square was to fight for a better society, fight for a democracy in China at the time. But given the consequences that you haven't seen your family, friends in China for so long, given the consequences, do you regret at all for the decision you made back then?
Do I regret? No. Would I do it again? I don't know. If I have a time machine that can take me back, and that I know the result will be this bloody, there will be so many human life sacrifices. Would I do it again? I bet I'll be very, very hesitant. And then also, I think very importantly, I cannot speak for those who sacrificed. They took the street, they started their hunger strike on their very, very own independent spirit, and then we should honor them.
Wu'er Kaixi, thank you so much for joining China Tonight.
It's my great pleasure, and I always treasure this kind of channel to voice our opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other topic making a splash on socials this week, China's younger generation is talking about white people food.
Ever since I started eating white people food, my body is all confused, lingering between the states of I don't think I'm full and I'm really not full.
been obsessed with white people food lately. I don't feel sleepy or hot after the meals, and they're really easy to prepare while being nutritious.
White people food makes no difference whether I eat it or not. I just feel empty.
Also, there has been much debate about if a woman can wear a wedding dress more than once in her lifetime. It comes after a woman wearing a wedding dress to a concert of a famous male singer gets dumped by her boyfriend.
Then I suggest that men should only wear a suit once in their lifetime.
Girls have the right to wear what they want. Boys have the right to break up. No one is hindering anyone, so what's there to discuss?
Why should it only be worn at weddings? I took wedding photos with my dorm mates at graduation as we got married to our youth.
But the biggest story of the week has been the return of Yaya. The panda is back in China to live out her golden years. After 2 decades in the US, she has become a symbol of the deteriorating relations between the two superpowers.
Yaya can finally live alongside her friends. So happy.
Americans can't match the level of care we can provide here at home.
I tear up when I look at Yaya for having travelled so far for her mother nation.
Happy Children's Day, baby Yaya. Love you, love you, love you.
There's a new space race, this time between the US and China, and America could be losing. Over the past year, China has built a space station that's manned by taikonauts and sent a rover to Mars.
China also became the first nation to touch down on the far side of the moon. Meanwhile, NASA has clocked the explosive growth of China's space program, and it's worried.
Certainly a very surreal experience being in space. It's just so beautiful. The colors are very bright and vivid, and you look out towards what we call the Earth limb, the horizon, and the sunlight passing through the air of the atmosphere causes it to almost fluoresce, glow these beautiful shades of blue. So it really is a special experience.
I think we are in a space race with China. They are very aggressive and they are very good. And a lot of that success has come within the last few years.
就是我们国家这个一贯的主张就是，只要是坚持以这个和平、利用太空为目的的，我们愿意与任何国家，或者是航天组织，进行合作和交流。
My sense is overall, China still has some way to go in terms of catching up with the United States in space science and technology. But the Chinese space program has been quite successful, particularly from 1990s, with the support of the financial contribution from the central government, and they have recruited many talents to develop science and technology. Now China is catching up. We know that space is so critical to these two countries' economy, to these two countries' international standing. The United States is building up its space force. And I believe the same thing is happening within China to make sure that China is not only catching up, but also in some areas might overtake the United States.
In 2022, global spending on space programs hit a record $103 billion US, with the US accounting for about half of that spending. But China is catching up, having doubled their space spending in the past decade. Leroy Chow is a retired astronaut and one-time commander of the International Space Station. He visited the Chinese Astronaut Center in 2006.
They are very serious about it. They've obviously borrowed a lot of technology from the Russians, but they've done that thing where they've taken it and made it a little bit better, right? They've modernized it. And so their hardware is very good.
这么一个阶段的工作，我们的比如说我们航天员系统承担的登月服务的研制，我们完成了关键技术的攻关。我们对新一代的飞船，然后这个月面着陆器，还有比如月球车，所有这些跟人有关的这个工程设计，我们提出了医学和工效学的要求。
Their space station is actually quite advanced. And so, it's not nearly as large as the ISS. However, I would argue that it's actually better to be smaller. So I think the Chinese have probably built a pretty good compromise size station that's big enough to do meaningful work, but small enough that you're not spending all your time doing maintenance and repair work.
The space station is manned full-time by taikonauts who spend most of their time conducting research, as well as practicing traditional Chinese musical instruments, teaching science lessons,
take this glass of water,
exercising, and of course, conducting spacewalks.
完全靠双手，黑，深不见底的黑，那种巨大的心理打击，就像一下子把你的心给抓紧了那种感觉一样。
So is there a new space race going on? And is China winning?
I don't think so. It's not like in the 60s with the Soviet Union where we were racing to the moon. There was a feeling in the country and probably in the Soviet Union too that this was life or death. We had to win. We had to win this to show that we had the superior technology. And we did when we landed humans on the moon in 1969. If China were to land the next astronauts on the moon, okay, well, that's great. You know, we did it in 1969. We're planning to do it again.
A couple of years ago, the Chinese spacecraft landed on the far side of the moon. And that was the first time that any country has done that. Because of the competition between China and the United States, almost on all fronts, this competition will continue.
The Chinese are very intolerant of any examination of their space program. They are very inflexible. They are not very transparent. I wish they'd do what the old Soviet Union did. When it came to civilian space, I wish they'd cooperate and be transparent.
But the US has also been unwilling to work with China. In 2001, Congress enacted the Wolf Amendment, limiting NASA from collaborating with the Chinese government or Chinese companies.
我也觉得非常遗憾，就是咱们美国国会相关的议案啊，有这样的一个规定啊，禁止美方和中方啊，进行这个航天领域的这个合作。
Yeah, I think the situation has frankly deteriorated on both sides. You know, there's a huge distrust in the United States of the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party. Similarly, on the Chinese side, Xi Jinping has cemented his power. You know, he's looking to the long term, wants to become the leading superpower to surpass the United States.
High-flying drama Born to Fly is China's answer to Top Gun, but it almost failed to take off.
It was mysteriously delayed last year, possibly to avoid a dogfight with Hollywood blockbuster Top Gun Maverick.
The Chinese version of Top Gun is a box office smash and puts propaganda firmly on the front line. There's little doubt the government-backed action film is a proudly nationalistic military blockbuster, but is it targeting the other superpower? Flying into the danger zone. It's been called China's answer to Top Gun.
Good morning, aviators. This is your captain speaking.
With aerial acrobatics and cinematic spectacle, the film is backed by the People's Liberation Army Air Force.
It was going to come out on National Day, which is October the 1st in China, and then just 2 or 3 days before its scheduled release, it stopped. And we don't actually know why. There was great speculation that it was plagiaristic. It was a direct rip-off of Top Gun Maverick and the Top Gun franchise. But there were also suggestions that the quality of the movie, the special effects weren't really up to scratch, and they would go back and redo them. It emerged, it did well for a week, and now it's gone away rather quickly. It's flown off.
The plot involves a hot-headed young pilot played by former boy band singer and rising star Wang Yibo. He is recruited by the military's Flight Test Bureau to develop a new top-secret stealth fighter and he devotes his life to the motherland.
虽然不是你的肉，你还有个价值有费。
I don't know the cost of the movie, and that's a crucial factor in determining whether it's profitable or not. We know what the box office was. It was satisfactory. But if it was a very expensive movie to make, then they might have lost money.
The film showcases China's most advanced stealth jet fighter, the J-20. But critics claim the film's movie stunts and visual effects were far inferior to Hollywood's Top Gun, and the Chinese Communist Party was worried it risked ridicule.
Oh my God!
He must be somewhere behind us.
Of course, movies like Born to Fly aren't just made for entertainment and box office sales. They also serve as a propaganda tool trying to sell military might.
Well, there's absolutely nothing new about propaganda movies in China or other parts of the world. The concept of making a film with a pro-government message is not new. What has changed a lot in China is how proficient those have been and how they seem to be genuinely popular these days.
As did Top Gun Maverick, which was never released in China. No official reason was given, but online speculation pointed to sensitivities around an American movie that portrayed its military in such a slavishly positive way.
It's not the plane, it's the pilot.
And the original movie from the 1980s proved to be a potent recruitment tool for the US Air Force.
Tower, this is Ghost Rider requesting a flyby.
Negative, Ghost Rider. The pattern is full.
No doubt, the People's Liberation Air Force is hoping Born to Fly will do the same.
前线就等着这把枪呢，没错。
And while we have you on the show, Wenlei, there are some new Chinese films being screened in Australia at film festivals.
Yeah, the Sydney Film Festival started this week and there's a selection of films from China, but my favourite one is called Art College 1994. It is set in 1994, shocking, it's in the title, and it is about art students kind of making their way through life, through love, through their ambitions, whether or not they can be these idealistic creatives or whether or not they have to kind of come down to earth and face the reality of life.
装置艺术嘛，就这个。 那咱们宿舍那到处都是装置啊，比这还好。
I was lucky enough to speak with the director Liang, and I asked him what he wanted to deliver with this movie.
90年代的校园相对是一个象牙塔的存在，对于我们的社会来讲，所以当时的学生更多也是一种理想主义的一个状态，大家谈论的问题都是关于艺术啊，关于哲学呀。 一些非常形而上的一些问题，然后现在的大学的校园，因为时代的变化，所以更多的是会参与到这个社会生活的当中去。